a session on environmental peacebuilding in the Middle East. The way we framed it is its opportunities and challenges. This is perhaps a little bit more of an exploratory session than some of the others. We are a relatively new interest group within MPACs. We are slowly finding our feet. And there are other sessions at this conference that are centered on much more specific environmental peacebuilding projects, particularly in Israel, Halasah, and Jordan. Here we're taking a much broader political region. It's one that goes well beyond the Jordan Basin. It's my contention, and it's certainly one that's up to dispute, that there is remarkably little environmental peacebuilding in the Middle East and North Africa beyond the Jordan Basin, even if there are undoubtedly plenty of instances that are environmental peacebuilding that are just not labeled as such. And if one accepts that premise, I mean, among the big questions we're posing are, well, why is that the case, given that it's a region that appears to be extremely suitable? You all know the stats. It's a region with about 6% of the global population, about 1.5% of freshwater reserves, being absolutely battered by an array of climate stresses, as well as environmental degradation of a different order.
the Iraqi marshes has been facing a lot of a problem. And that's pushing a lot of people to rethink about the situation. One of those people is me, Salman. I start thinking how I left my land, how I left Baghdad to be in Basra, in the south part of Iraq, because of the terrorists in 2006. But in the same time, there is a family from the marshes. They moved to another city called Samarra, just because there is no water. And this is the water organization. I moved because of the water, and they moved because of the lack of water. All this, the people, they thought after 2003, the life will be different and the life will be changed. We do have a lot of water, the water will back, and we can live in peace. But all these numbers in the front of you is the people who has forced to immigrate, according to the report has been done by IOM. And you can see all these huge numbers is just from a small area around 10,000 square meter from the Iraqi marshes. In 2015, we start our fight. We start to create a movement called Hamad Dijla, and we start focusing more how to help those people and how to do more awareness, more lobbying, more advocacy. This is cost us a lot. Cost us that when we go to the demonstration, we're facing a lot of a problem. We cannot talk about environment in the peace way that you can talk about it here in Europe. We can talk about it later in a Q&A also about why the environmentalists are facing all those problems. Why you have to move from area to another area because of your environmental activism. All these problems because of the political and economical and social perspectives that we talk about it when we talk about water in Iraq. This is the difference. This is it's my teacher, is Jasmine Asadi. I started with him in 2016 when I was really a child, when I was 13 years old or 14 years old. Jasmine Asadi and I, we faced a lot of a problem because of our activism and because of our work. Of course, I'm not thinking in front of Jasmine Asadi, but in the end, I am the smallest one also in this environmentalist work facing all this problem. What about the others? And what they are facing, we will talk about it later in the Q&A. Thank you so much.
In about 2015-16, I wrote a white paper arguing in large part because of the work of Salman and Jassim and an array of other brilliant Iraqi environmentalists that then even more divided country than we have now, the environment can be that kind of cleavage breaking issue that could help bring people together. But one of those sort of unfortunate twists, the kind of increasing importance and the increasing political salience of environment ensured that people like Salman, people like Jassim ended up with more of a target on their backs than they otherwise might have had. We will talk more. But I mean, yeah, from Iraq to Libya, from one country that is ostensibly or from the outside kind of calling out for environmental peace building through to another. I mean, last September we had, as Jeannie alluded to, perhaps one of the most in-your-face illustrations of how prolific mismanagement and ongoing conflict can absolutely cripple a country's capacity to manage climate stresses. I mean, I live in Greece, and in September 2023, we had Storm Daniel, which collectively killed about 14 people in Greece, Bulgaria, and Turkey. And then it got to Libya, and as I imagine Matthew will be alluding to, the toll was extremely different there, even though the storm had theoretically somewhat weakened at that point. But Matthew, over to you.
Thanks. I can go back to the damage. So my name is Matthew. You can just call me you. So I come at this from a slightly different track because I was a career UNist, also working in the UN peacekeeping and special political missions for about 20 years before I resigned to focus on climate. And I really have Libya to thank for that. So I thank Libya. But the way I got into it was a little bit unique, and that's what I want to focus on in terms of what I learned there. When I arrived there in 2016, in Libya as an advisor to the special envoy, the envoy basically said to me, these guys aren't interested in reaching a peace agreement. They're making too much money. And so he said, Matthew, that create an economic track, try to understand and manipulate the interest in order to get them to the political settlement. So, in what became the Berlin process, we created an economic track, and we had experts from across the country, from the two governments, and we created an economic reform track, which did succeed in the end, and we created a new government called the Government of National Unity. But the only way we get ahead is basically through crisis. You basically have to wait until the powers that be basically destabilize themselves, because it's the system is wholly unsustainable. So it just basically has to break, and it's only when the system breaks and destabilizes that you push through reform. And it's really the same way with climate change and the environment. And Libya is an extraordinary country. Let me just describe a little bit from the climate angle how extraordinary. So Libya is the only country that doesn't have a national internal contribution. It's the only country, even Western Sahara has one, I don't even remember. They're the only ones that haven't had that. They are one of the biggest carbon emitters per capita. Oh, you want me to talk louder? I'll stand up. So they're the only country that doesn't that has the highest per capita carbon emissions in the world. They're 11.5 per capita. It makes them higher than any country in Africa and any country in Europe. So that they're emitting an enormous amount of carbon emissions, and they can't seem to break it down. And we tried so many different efforts. I drafted an NGC for them because we were requested to do it by the Minister of Environment. I put in a fugitive emissions mapping system to try to bring down the leaks of the methane and so forth. I tried with the water management, because water is one of the biggest weaknesses they have, especially with the Northern Basin, which is about to run out. So all these issues are so impactful that they represent an existential threat to the country, yet they're totally unable to do anything about it, even though they recognize it. Even I had the Minister of Water say, Matthew, the way we do agriculture in Libya is an exercise in collective suicide, but I can't do anything about it. I can't. And why can't they do anything about it? Is it because they're not smart people? They're smart people. They know what they're doing. The reason is the exact same reason that they couldn't get to a political agreement, because the system has so many vested interests that they can't do the reforms. They just simply can't do it. And that's why you have to wait until the cage shakes a little bit. And let me just give you, I have a lot of failures, and I can explain why they all failed, renewables and so forth, but I'm going to talk about the two little successes that we had. So subsidy reform is a huge issue in Libya. The price of gasoline hasn't increased since 1987. It's 3 cents a liter, which makes it very, very lucrative for smuggling, if they say that. They spend 18% of their national budget on that, and it's increasing all the time. In fact, a lot of it's going to the RSF right now in Sudan. And subsidy reform is the main thing you need to do in order to rationalize energy use, because they don't pay, they waste a lot and so forth. And it's the main thing you need to do to introduce renewable energy, because every renewable energy I've ever worked on fails because nobody pays electric bills. So if you don't pay electric bills, how are you gonna pay for the renewable energy that's not part of the subsidies? So we've done so much work with the World Bank and all of WFP and everybody on subsidy reform. The only subsidy reform that ever happened was in 2019 that nobody knows about, not any Libyan knows about. And it was when the country was in the grip of a liquidity crisis. There was no liquid in the banks, and there was overspending, there was inflation happening and so forth. And the Minister of Economy, basically, because there were such strong price distortions in the actual fuel that was being given to the people, that he just cut subsidies on kerosene and lubricants. He just cut it with one stroke of a pen, and nobody knew about it. And they saved like $900 million a year on this subsidy reform, and nobody knows about it. And I used to call it subsidy reform by substitute. But the other example I had was with electricity. So the electricity grid in 2019, 2020 was about to collapse because the demand was getting much too higher than the supply. And we were thinking it was getting around 50%, and we were thinking it's the whole grid's gonna collapse, and we're gonna have to create a new energy system, a segregated system of mini grids and so forth. But the grid was of such value because it had been built well that we decided to save it. And the way we saved it was because the GECO, the electric company, which is a monopoly, they were so vulnerable. Like they were being threatened personally themselves by the people. There's fires in the street and so forth. And so we were able to develop an 8-phase grid stabilization program. Because of the crisis, because they needed it so badly, but we only got to stage 2, which is basically the maintenance of the existing turbines. And when the power came down, they stopped working. They just stopped because they didn't need to anymore. The incumbent system had come back. There was no more crisis, so there was no need to go further into energy efficiency or renewable energy. And that's why I say you have to wait for the crisis to hit, and the crisis will present an opening, and you have to be ready to go through it. And so in the meantime, before the crisis happens, there's 3 things basically that I learned you have to do. The one thing is you have to be prepared. You have to be ready with the policy options that are the most feasible, that are the easiest to do, and you have to socialize that within the fabric of the government, so everybody kind of understands what's happening and kind of agrees with it, because the institutions are very fragmented. So you have to spend time reviewing over and over again the same thing, so that when the crisis hits, you push that reform through. The second thing is to diversify your efforts, because you're bound to fail. So diversify on how you're doing your programming. And the third thing is relationships. Build very good relationships, because in Libya, where the institutions are so weak, it's the personalities who outweigh the important. So, the Minister of Finance, the payroll officer, these are the ones who have the real authority. So you build good relationships with everybody, because they switch all the time. And that gives you the capital to do some changes when you put the opportunities. Thanks.
Thank you, Maggie. We were, and I've got a few questions that I would like to throw at our presenters. However, I'm also aware that time is sort of marching on, and perhaps I will come back to all of you at the end with a brief question or two, and a chance for you to give your sort of final thoughts and feedback. As I said, we welcome assertions, not just questions, in fact, particularly assertions. This is an extremely exploratory session. The only thing I would emphasize, please, is brevity. I will rudely, apologetically cut you off if you go on excessively. Equally, we've talked a lot about the challenges, as well we should. To be frank, my work